أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمد صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهداه إلى يوم الدين فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهادي هدي محمد صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربي لا تؤاخذني مما يقولون واغفر لي من لا يعلمون واجعلني خيرا مما يظنون. Amen. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Welcome one more time to the house of dua, and welcome to another blessed day of Jumu'ah in the year 1445 after the Hijrah of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Welcome to the channel from which you learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about His creation, about His message, about His messenger, and of course, about His preferred religion known as Al-Islam. Welcome to the channel from which you learn how to live and be happy in the world we live today, and how to return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for greater happiness and success on the day of accountability. And talking about living happy in the world we live today and returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of accountability for greater happiness. That is the essence of the series we are bringing to you from Surah Al-Hujjuraat. Surah Al-Hujjuraat, which is chapter 49 of the Holy Quran, is a surah like no other surah, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed several revelations, evidences, lessons, proofs, ayats that are meant to guide us on how to treat one another so that we will live happily in this world and return back to Allah for accountability on the day of judgment for even greater happiness and success. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, as I've said repeatedly, if everyone in the world were to understand and live by the revelations of the Holy Quran, and especially Surah Al-Hujjuraat, the world will be a better place for all of us to live in. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the world a good place for all of us. Today, we are coming to you with verse 11 of Surah Al-Hujjuraat. We have brought you several verses in which we reminded you of the commandment of Allah to honor those who are in authority over us, and especially to honor the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, while he was alive physically with us, and even now that he's no longer with us in person. We are expected to honor him. That's why it's a sunnah, and of course, a highly rewardable sunnah for us when we hear the name of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam mentioned. We must and should reply by saying sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, we also brought you verses in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed why we must verify information that come to us about other people. We need to verify such information in order to not harm people ignorantly. And when the facts are known, we come to regret our actions. We have also brought verses to you in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when there's a dispute among us, especially between two parties, then it behoves on all of us to constitute ourselves into the third party to resolve that dispute. And especially charging our leaders to make sure that when there is disputes in the society between its members, or between her and its members, or between her and other nations, then such disputes should be resolved amicably. And those who are charged with the responsibilities of resolving such disputes must be fair and just. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to count us among such people. Today, we are coming to you with another verse that will remind us of what we need to do towards one another in order for us to have harmony and happiness and cohesion in the society we live. That's why we are bringing to you verse 11 of Surah Al-Hujjuraat, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declares, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la yaskar qawmun min qawmin asa an yakunu khayran minhum wala nisa'un min nisa'in asa an yakunna khayran minhunna ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابزوا بالألقاب بئس الاسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان ومن لم يتب فأولئك هم الظالمون. Amazing. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O you who have believed, do not scoff at one another. Do not revile one another. Do not despise one another using your mouth or in any other form. Do not scoff at one another. Just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us in another part of the Quran, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Do not kill one another. Because why? إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ. That's another ayah we brought to you before. All Muslims, believers, are brothers and sisters to one another. Therefore, it's better for you to reconcile among yourselves than to be killing one another. Because if a Muslim kills another Muslim, it's like killing himself. It's like taking your loved one away from you. In that case, you cripple your own well-being. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, in this very verse that we are bringing, Allah says, don't let a group of people scoff at another group of people. Don't let some scoff at others. Don't let individuals scoff at other individuals. And especially, don't let the men scoff at one another. Perhaps the one you are scoffing at is better than the one who is scoffing at him. The latter is better than the former. And you don't know that the person you are reviling, you are trying to bring down, the person you are, using your mouth to defame, that person actually in the face of Allah, before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is better than you. وَلَا نِسَاءٌ مِّن نِسَاءٍ عَسَىٰ أَن يَكُنَّ خَيْرًا مِّنْهُنَّ. And women should not scoff at one another as well. For it's possible that a woman who is scoffing at another woman, the woman you are scoffing at is actually better than the one who is scoffing at her in the sight of Allah. وَلَا تَلْمِزُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Do not find fault among yourselves. Do not bend down to look at the back of another person, because if you do so, somebody else is bending down looking at your own back. You are actually exposing your own back by yourself. And do not assign bad nicknames, derogatory nicknames at one another. Nicknames that are designed to denigrate the status of another person. Do not assign it to yourself. This is sinfulness after one has believed. Why will you return to sinfulness after you have believed as Muslims? Whoever does not stop doing all this, that is reviling others, scoffing at people with your mouth and denigrating them, or finding fault in other people, especially those who are leaders among you, or finding fault in fellow human beings, or those who are stigmatizing others by assigning bad nicknames to them. Whoever does not desist from this act, such person should be considered as a wrongdoer. And every wrongdoer, unless he or she repents, is bound to enter hell on the day of accountability. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, these are very, very important. We are talking of interpersonal relationship. How do we deal with one another at family level, at community level, at national level, at world level? How do we deal with one another? How do we address each other in order for us to live happily? How do we conceal the obvious defects in some of us in order for us to live happily? Let's go to the first one. Allah says, La yasawkamu minkum asa yakumu khairan minkum. Do not scoff at one another or revile one another. In what sense? By way of speaking bad about somebody in order for you to bring his image down before other people. Many people are there nowadays who are spreading false information about other people. Whether you do so by use of your mouth or by drawing somebody's photograph, caricaturing that person, or by acting movies or films, or writing a book, or publicizing something in order to bring that person's name into disrepute, you are actually committing this sin of reviling people or scoffing at people in order to bring them down. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam drew our attention to this by identifying areas in ourselves that are of particular importance. Somebody who has some defects, especially natural defects, with which is created by Allah. He could be blind or deaf or crippled or fat or slim. It's not your concern. Why will you be using that as a basis to ridicule that person? Anybody who seeks to ridicule his partner or brother or sister using references to his natural body defects, that person has committed sin. And the hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah, which is in Sahih Muslim, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was quoted as saying, Inna la yanzuru ila suwarikum wa amwalikum. Inna ma yanzuru ila qulubikum wa amalikum. Allah does not look at your outward appearance. He does not consider how much you have in terms of wealth, but is interested in your heart and in your actions. Whatever you do, Allah will hold you accountable. The level of purity in your heart or sinfulness in your heart, Allah reads it and He will hold you accountable for it. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, in the same surah we are bringing to you, Allah says, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The most honored among you in the sight of Allah is the one who has the consciousness of Allah, not the one who has money or the one who has beautiful outlook or heavy possessions of materialism in this world. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, the other aspect of this ayah is what is called lams. That is, somebody finding fault in another person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, do not find fault in other people. Bending down to look at other persons. Remember that you have your own fault. Among the Sahabas at that time, they used to say, Wafika uyubin walinasi ayun. Remember that you have faults and people have eyes with which to see those faults. Do not think that you are the only person who can find fault in any person. Just as you find fault in others, so others will find fault in you. This is the life we live. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, it is wrong for us to find fault in people. There are people who are cynical, who are always there to find fault in other people. Even if there is a good leader, they don't find anything good in that good leader. They always want to find fault in what that leader does. No, you don't have to do that. You are free to criticize, but you have to be objective and very constructive in your criticism of your leaders. Do not spend your time finding fault in them. If you find that they have done good things, there's nothing wrong in saying that what they have done is right, is good, and to thank them for it. If they have done a bad thing, there's nothing wrong in pointing it out as well. But to dedicate yourself finding fault, and even when good has been done by somebody you don't consider it to be good, instead you want to find fault in it, that is a very bad attitude, and we need to stop it. This is very common in the world we live today, especially between political parties who are struggling for power in government. Even if the other party is doing well, they want to find faults in what he has done. That is not good enough. This is why there is instability in various governments across the world. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, same thing happens at the family level. Same thing happened in other people's life. In Surah Al-Imran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has criticized those who want to do something and wish to be praised for it, or something they have not done, they wish to be praised for it. That is a bad attitude. But what you have done that is good, there's nothing wrong in being celebrated for it. Allah says, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ يَفْرَحُونَ بِمَا أَتَوْا وَيُحِبُّونَ أَن يُحْمَدُوا بِمَا لَمْ يَفْعَلُوا وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّهُم بِمَفَازَةٍ مِنَ الْعَذَابِ وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. Those who want to be praised for what they have done and even want to be praised for what they have not done, let them know that that's a bad attitude and it will not save them from the punishment of Allah. My dear brothers, my dear sisters. But the reverse is the case. When somebody has done something good, there's nothing wrong in celebrating and thanking that person instead of turning yourself into a cynic, a negative critic, in order to bring that person down. It must be recognized that all of us have our own internal weaknesses. And the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam told us what is known as jihad bin nafs. Instead of finding fault in other people, find fault in yourself first. Find fault in yourself and work hard to rectify such faults. That means struggling against your own soul in order to make sure that you are a better person. That is what is called jihad bin nafs. You have to try to do that to become a righteous person. Instead of finding fault in other people, find fault in yourself. And dear brothers, my dear sisters, the third element of the verse we are bringing to you is what is called وَلَا تَنَابَّزُوا بِالْأَلْقَابِ. Tanabbuzu bil alikab is a sin committed by assigning nicknames to somebody, nicknames that you know that are derogatory, looking at the person's physical feature or looking at outside his physical feature and assigning nicknames to that person. And whenever the person is called that name, he feels offended. That is wrong in Islam. We are not allowed to do that because it's a sin. Everybody has his own name that he or she cherishes. We should call people by such names instead of assigning nicknames that will bring them into disrepute. A man known as Abu Jubair al-Ansari, who was a Sahabi, said this ayah was revealed because many of them, when they migrated from Makkah to Medina, they had more than one name. Some had two, some had three. And some of these names mean different things to different people. Some connote negative denigration against those who bear such names. But most people were focusing on those names that denigrate the persons in order to expose them to ridicule. And guess what? The Prophet didn't even know about it. So when they came, he was calling such people by such names until his attention was drawn to it. That these names, whenever the people were called, they felt unhappy about it. The Prophet immediately corrected himself and apologized to such people. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, if the Prophet could do that, what about ourselves? Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma narrated that another aspect of Tanabuz bil al-Kab is that here is somebody who did something wrong before. Maybe he was a thief, he stole, or had committed any offense, but he has repented out of that and has now become of good behavior. It will be wrong of you as a fellow Muslim who knew about that to continuously use that nickname to call the person or to address him or to remind him of his past in that manner. That is wrong. The sin in it is woeful and is punishable by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, let us be careful what we call people. Nowadays, people want to provoke us who are Muslims into unnecessary confrontation by doing what? By assigning bad nicknames to our Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. They don't know what they are doing. Whenever such things happen, many of us react negatively because it's not good. But are we to do it to ourselves when we know it is not good? When others do it to us, we should not be doing it to ourselves. These are the things that help us promote harmony, cohesion, love in the society if we avoid them, this negative stuff. But when we focus on the good aspect, it will help us build harmony and peace and love in the society. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, let us learn to respect one another. There are, however, some exceptions to this. And the exceptions are, there are nicknames that are good, that are very, very respectful, that carry some level of honor, and especially if such nicknames are meant as a sign of identification. For example, nicknames or titles arising from one's achievement, like those who are professors, for example, Professor so and so, or Doctor so and so, or Sheikh so and so, or Mufti so and so, or any other title that somebody earned legitimately through the dint of hard work. There's nothing wrong in calling people by such titles. But what of titles that are meant for self-aggrandizement or to make praise people beyond what they are, or to even elevate them to the attributes of Allah, such as Your Excellency, even when we know the person is corrupt to the core. Nobody is excellent except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Such as the honorable. Who is honorable? Allah is the honorable. Al-Karim. There's no human being that is honorable. Somebody you are calling honorable in the next few days is backbiting or stealing public money or doing something different. And we continue to do all this. Such as people you call the King of Kings. He's the king of your country does not mean he's the King of Kings. The King of Kings is Allah, Al-Malik. We have to be careful what we use our mouth to say. They might look to be trivial before us. To you, it might be trivial, but to Allah, it's very great. And dear brothers, my dear sisters, when certain names or nicknames or titles connote some positivity and the person who is being called likes it, there's nothing wrong about that. That's the tradition we inherited from the Prophet. You remember the Prophet even gave some nickname to some of the Sahabas, like Abu Bakr ibn Uthman ibn Abi Kahafa. He called him Abu Bakr as-Siddiq because he was a man of truth. The same thing Umar ibn Khattab was called Al-Faruq because he was a man who knew the distinction between right and wrong. What of Uthman ibn Affan? Dhul Nurayn, because he had the honor of marrying two daughters of the Prophet at different times. And what about Talha ibn Ubaidullah? He was known as Talhatul Khair, Talha of goodness. And what about Az-Zubayr? Because he was so close to the Prophet called him as Sahabi, my true disciple. And what about Ali ibn Abi Talib? The Prophet told him, you are to me a brother just like Harun was a brother to Prophet Musa alayhi salam. These were titles given by the Prophet to those who were close to him. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, when it comes to addressing people, let us learn how to use the best language and focus on the positive aspect of that person's life instead of focusing on his negative parts or finding ways to denigrate that person, thereby bringing some ill feelings within ourselves. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us good people. Take Shaitan away from our lives and take our lives far away from the Shaitan. Until we come your way again with another verse from Surah Al-Hujjuraat, continue to go back to our previous videos, especially the videos on this series, Surah Al-Hujjuraat. It will help all of us to build a very harmonious and loving society. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. سبحان الله وبحمده ونسبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. الحمد لله.